Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And turn now to the man who's been in the corner of your screen and the little preview box is now in the middle of your screen opening arguments with former acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal, who's argued dozens of cases before the Supreme Court. I have a lot I want to get into with you, but first, big picture, your view of where Chairman Nadler is taking this.
Well, I think, my question for him is, what took you so long? I mean, we have known this for a long time. And, with Governor Dean is talking about corruption and crookery, that's separate. The constitutional impeachment remedy for high crimes and misdemeanors is about a president who abuses the public trust. And if you just look at the Mueller report, you can open up to any page, basically, and you will see an example of the president doing that. And for someone like me who reveres the Constitution, as so many Americans do, as a document to bring us together, as a document that says the president has to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed, you've got a guy who's trampling on all of that. And it's a grave constitutional wound. And that's what impeachment is for. It's a process. It's not an outcome. So all these Dems who are like, well, we might not have the votes in the Senate, that should be irrelevant. Your job is, your first job in Congress is to protect our Constitution, vote accordingly. And, so I'm glad to see Chairman Nadler finally getting the show on the road.
It's interesting to get your responses, if I may, an institutionalist looking at that. I also want to ask you about this so-called effort to investigate the investigators. And Neil, one thing I could tell viewers is I will never ask Neil Katyal to read my fortune, and I'll never ask you to predict what's going on inside a secret grand jury room, because both are equally impossible. But I am curious what you make of the public maneuvering around it, which is the man who used to at one point be in charge of the Trump-Russia probe, Andrew McCabe, who took over for James Comey, releasing this, I think we all agree, unusual letter asking Bill Barr to fess up about what's going on, reports that they were considering or trying to indict him, reports from the Washington Post that the grand jury did meet. We don't know what went on inside the room. And for everyone's context, and I want to read from that letter, we heard rumors from reporters, grand jury considering charges against McCabe, declined to vote an indictment. We don't know if that's true. But McCabe's lawyer is saying it's clear no indictment has been returned. That's their view. Could be, of course, sealed, or it could be something else. But the context, of course, Neil, is the pressure that has been brought to bear on the DOJ to investigate the investigator, something that Bill Barr was less than forthcoming about in this exchange. Take a look.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The president or anybody else.
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation, but
perhaps they've suggested.
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted.
I don't know.
Inferred. You don't know. Okay.
Neil?
Yeah, outrageous. I've had the privilege of serving in 2 different administrations, and I can tell you that there is a iron wall that protects the Justice Department from the White House in terms of who should be prosecuted and who shouldn't. Those are Justice Department decisions, Ari. They're not decisions for the president for all sorts of good reasons, because the prosecution power is immense and, can turn anyone's life upside down. And so the whole idea is the Justice Department makes these on a non-political basis. And here you've got Trump pardoning his friends like Sheriff Joe Arpaio and Dinesh D'Souza, and really effectively it looks like throwing the book at other people, including his political enemies. And, that started obviously with the campaign and lock her up. I guess that wasn't successful, but some of the other ones appear to be starting to gain some traction.
And briefly,
including McCabe.
Do you think the DOJ can say whether or not this case is over?
So the McCabe one is very interesting. So, on Thursday, it was revealed that the Justice Department rejected McCabe's request not to be indicted, but then he wasn't indicted. And so everyone's like, what is going on? And right now, it's impossible to know, as you say, from your fortune cookie thing, but at least one very likely explanation, and getting increasingly likelier with every moment, is that the grand jury, Ari, has refused to render an indictment of Andrew McCabe. And that's really significant. The grand jury is part of our Fifth Amendment. It was written in for the most profound of historical reasons. It was the trial of John Peter Zenger in 1734, who was this guy who basically wrote all of this anti-crown, anti-New York colonial governor newspaper screeds. And the king and the governor tried to have him arrested. And two different grand juries said, you're not indicting that guy. And that's what led to our Fifth Amendment. And indeed, actually, our First Amendment and Fourth all come from that trial as well. So this is a critical safeguard on the abuse of the prosecution power, and it's a really rare thing to see a grand jury ever say no when you want to seek an indictment. The kind of standard phrase from the New York Court of Appeals high judge was, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich.
Sure.
But here, again, we don't know. We're just looking at this, but at least one explanation is looking increasingly likely, which is the grand jury took the incredibly rare step of protecting individual liberty and siding against government abuse in the prosecution.
And if that's what happened, that would be a fascinating example of something we were covering earlier in the hour, the guardrails. Living history elucidated by Counselor Katyal, which is a pleasure to hear and learn from. Thank you, sir.
It is Tuesday, the 17th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A little bit of smoked hot Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. And that's inspired of Sebastian Gorka. Oh, yeah, Sebastian Gorka. You know who he is. I think he's going to get picked up by OANN, or is it OAN? You know, the rival to Fox, the up-and-coming media outlet, Trump TV. Well, because I only bring up Gorka because I was taken to task that apparently being an anti-fascist is the equivalent of a game of Dungeons and Dragons gone wrong, gone bad. That it is just some myth that there are fascists existing anywhere in the world. Of course, we all know Sebastian Gorka belongs to the Hungarian Nazis. But, and he wears the pin, too. Proudly, I might add. Defiantly. So, yeah, fascism doesn't exist. Marine Le Pen. Oh, no. You'll go ask her. Fascism? What I do is not fascism. The fascists always say that. Oh, yeah. Oh, what about the Missouri militia? Fascists? Proudly displaying nooses to, keep people in line. Nah. Jimmy Marr out here in Eugene, Oregon, flies the Holocaust was a hoax banners over the I-5 freeway in Eugene, Oregon. Routinely has goose-stepping marches and stiff-arm saluted accomplices right in front of his house there in Springfield, I believe is actually where his residence is. So yeah, fascism doesn't exist. Not at all. And it makes me wonder, there's a lot of dupes and idiots. Okay, there's some people who, are doing the work with a capital T and W for the hostile foreign powers, because it's not just one, it's many, and are completely unaware, but it sort of aligns along the realm of, well, if we're kicking the libs, doing the work of hostile foreign power is just icing on the cake. And then there's others who are dupes. And it's a little, it's a little bit different than being an idiot. An idiot is, probably just organically unaware, incapable. Whereas the dupe is easily manipulated. And then there are the assets. And all I can say, if you're not a 400-pound guy sitting on a sofa somewhere in Macedonia and you're not getting paid, if you're here in America doing what you're doing and you're not getting paid as an asset, what kind of libertarian capitalist are you? My. All right, because there's something very odd that has occurred within maybe the last several days. I noticed it more yesterday. For some reason on these message boards, now I don't belong to message boards elsewhere on Facebook geographically. Maybe you folks can find out. Take a look. Even on these closed groups, I am finding accounts that have not had one post since 2016, the election. Just around the time of the election, they shut down. And now, it's weird, a slew, we'll call it a slew, of accounts on Facebook have changed their profile pics and are now activated and making comments. I wonder what is up. Is it a coincidence? But then there's been the usual suspects who are, I think, really their modus operandi, or their reason to tet, is just to kick the libs. They consider it to be some perverse game. So if you bring up Russia, like the Russians hacking the FBI, that's some sort of fever dream. And they'll bring up Comet Pizza as an example of like, well, people fell for that, and so this other thing's a lie too. See, they gamed the refs. They game the refs. They throw out a bunch of like ridiculous conspiracy BS. And then when you actually have an investigation because of a hostile foreign power taking over our democracy, that is just some sort of fever dream like they have. Even though people are going to jail. People forget, especially on that side, that a guy went to Comet Pizza, shot up the place because he believed there was a basement there. There is no basement at Comet Pizza. You know where there was a basement? Jeffrey Epstein's place. In Florida, New York, and probably on his pleasure islands, too. Oh, yeah, we cover it all here. Where are we? We're right here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, we could or could not be going to war. We don't know yet. And we're going to be speaking about that because I don't know. It sounds like Vlad told Trump to back down. But the Sauds pay cash. So I don't know. He's in between Iraq and a hard place. Wow. That was an old one come back to haunt us, isn't it? What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Of course, at the top, Neil Cattell reminds us that Trump uses the Justice Department to pardon his friends while throwing the book at his political enemies. Yeah, that's not a representative democracy. No, that's not a separation of powers. No. And now, when we will attempt to try to hold this, is he a scofflaw? No, he's a mobster, to account after he's no longer in office, we're not going to do it because it'll look bad. The optics will look bad going after our opponents. Excuse me. The guy should be in jail. Should be. At least tried in a court of his peers. At least. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the new Interior Secretary is slammed for promoting a park police official under FBI investigation over a murder by subordinates on his watch. This stuff gets really fast. Less than a week after being kicked to the curb, John Bolton is already shopping a tell-all about the Trump White House. Guess when it would come out? Just before election time. Interesting now, isn't it? And unlike other presidents, Trump will be renting out the U.S. military because if Saudi Arabia pays cash, all those other loser rube nations will pay too. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the UK Supreme Court will hear cases that Boris Johnson's suspension of Parliament was illegal. It's already been proven so by a 3-judge panel of Scottish judges. Now it goes before the whole of the UK Supreme Court. And the arrest of a top Canadian police officer in Ottawa on charges of spying for Russia is certain to severely impact the intelligence operations of the Western Allied nations. This stuff gets really fast. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the right of the page, deftly located by superior graphic design, is our chat room link right there by the social media scroll, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And we thank you, Kelly, for doing that. Thank you. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, definitely located by superior graphic design as well, because of Tom. Thank you, Tom. Is our Patreon link. And all kidding aside, your generosity has sustained Netroots Radio for over 8 years now. We're celebrating our 8th anniversary of continuous, non-stop, that would be 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio, as the founders originally intended so many decades ago. Almost an eon. Wow. We weren't there, but we've taken up the mantle, and we take it seriously, and we thank you for your generosity for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. And so we really want to keep doing it, and our machinery is wearing out. You know, machinery isn't made to last, and we're looking for some newish ones. And thank you for allowing us to accumulate those funds to do so. We better do it quick. I know the Windows 7 operating system on one of the workhorses will no longer be supported come this December. Merry Savage Christmas. Okay. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that too, as well as doing graphic designs and all the other wonderful things that Tom does. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Before you pick up podcasts, you need to go to the show notes and links diary that I post 10 minutes before showtime, and then I get that linked up on social media, because because that's where all the show notes and links are, right there in the show notes and links diary. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes out of Share Blue Media by the great Oliver Willis. The Interior Department is being criticized for promoting former Park Police Chief Robert McLean to a senior position at the department while the FBI investigates an unarmed shooting that occurred on his watch. The family of Bijan Gazer protested outside the Interior headquarters in Washington on Monday yesterday. The Interior Department is headed by David Barnhart. Some people call him Bernhardt, and that's probably the way we should. Who was nominated by Trump for the position in February following the resignation of his scandal-plagued predecessor, Ryan Zinke. The reason they had Ryan Zinke in because he wasn't as corrupt as Bernhardt. But now they got the guy that they really should have had in there in the beginning, because when you're deconstructing the administrative state, who else are you going to get? Monday was McLean's first day as director of the Interior Department's Office of Law Enforcement and Security after stepping down from the Park Police. In a press release, the department said McLean has a stellar record protecting our most symbolic monuments and memorials and the visitors to them. Too bad he doesn't protect actual real people visiting those symbolic monuments to freedom, equality for all, due process, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while protecting my property because of the goodwill of my neighbors instead of being threatened by them and building walls and as many armaments as possible. McLean is being promoted with the case still unsolved. Kelly Gazer, Bijan Gazer's mother, told radio station WTOP. His father told a local television station that he has cried every one of the 668 days since his son was killed. Well, I can attest that my son just simply died at the end of the year, and I've cried every day since. What's it like to have your son murdered by Park Police? If there is a lesson in the career of U.S. Park Police Chief Robert D. McLean, it's that a lack of accountability is no bar to success. And that was noted in an editorial in the Sunday's Washington Post. The paper slammed McLean for demonstrating a breathtaking dereliction of duty in how he has handled the shooting. The United States is not a police state, the Washington Post continued in their editorial, but make no mistake, it has acted as one in the case of Gazer. Official silence that drags on for 22 months in the slaying of a U.S. citizen is unacceptable, unjustifiable, and un-American, the paper added. Christina Cabrera, out of Talking Points Memo, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton is reportedly already looking to land a book deal on his experiences at the White House after his unceremonious ouster less than a week ago. According to the Daily Beast, Bolton's been in talks with several literary agents about the potential tell-all. Literary agents? Are you sure they're literary agents? One of the Daily Beast's unnamed sources, one of those, said that Bolton, who parted ways with Trump on a notably hostile note, has a lot to dish. Do tell. Though it's unclear what exactly Bolton's plans to disclose, Trump and his staff reportedly have a system to persuade an outgoing aide not to write an embarrassing expose about the administration. I think they're called non-disclosure agreements, the NDA. Yeah, well, this is John Bolton. Do you really think you can shut up a John Bolton? At the new civil rights movement, and by way of raw story, is our final offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump has been banging the drums of war in recent days, pointing the finger at Iran for a massive drone attack on Saudi Arabia oil fields that caused the price of oil worldwide to spike. But on Sunday, Trump admitted, even bragged, that U.S. military forces are locked and loaded. Well, of course they are. We're the United States. We fly these big planes. We have satellites. Of course we're locked and loaded. But the way he made it sound is like, hey, we have an authorization. Do you know what? Do you? Trump also made clear he would be more than happy to order a strike on whatever country the Saudis tell him to hit, because he doesn't listen to Congress. He knows who butters his bread. That's not how the U.S. military has ever been used. They are not soldiers of fortune. They are not mercenary forces, really. It sometimes seems like they are. What else is a proxy war? Especially when we have our advisors there. We, Trump said, are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed. Those words stun many, with some, like MSNBC's Chris Hayes, effectively translating the realities of Trump's remarks that the allegedly murderous Saudi prince known as MBS is their new leader. Well, yeah, I mean, when they offer you the headless corpse, or at least, I don't know, maybe the video, as a form of tribute, to seal the deal. We're way past the horse's head on the bed. Way past. On Monday, Trump continued his march toward war, stunningly again bragging that the U.S. military is for sale, or at least for rent, and the Saudis are his favorite customer. Saudi Arabia pays cash, Trump boasted in the Oval Office during a press gaggle. We would certainly help them, Trump said, noting that they've been a great ally. They spent $400 billion in our country over the last number of years. $400 billion. That's 1.5 million jobs. No, it's not. It's $400 billion, though. Moments earlier, Trump admitted that if the U.S. engages in military action against the country of Saudi Arabia's choosing, Saudi Arabia would be very much involved in paying for that. Where have I heard that another country is going to pay for something? Where have I heard that? Oh, it's okay. We can always take money away from our military. This is something that's much different than other presidents would mention, Trump said, repeatedly saying the Saudis would be very much involved, and that includes payment. Where have I heard that before? Trump is literally renting out the U.S. Armed Forces and admitting it. No mention what happens if and when any U.S. service member dies as a result of his freelancing out our troops. Don't worry. They're taking out janitor loans on all of them right now as we speak. What's a janitor loan? It's a way of making money on your worker's death. All right, that brings us to the end of this period here in the Bistro Cafe, and we got to get on to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jared Rizzi. Kids spend a lot of time looking at screens, and some parents worry. But a new study argues against the apprehension parents may feel.
The danger is that they're hearing a message that social media, digital technology use is causing very serious and harmful problems like depression, like suicide-related behaviors.
Candace Odgers, professor of psychological science at the University of California, Irvine.
And the idea is that if you shut off social media, which lots of kids use to connect with each other, their friends, find out information about health, you could in fact be making a situation worse. Parents are really being sent a message that is not supported by anything scientifically.
Odgers and her colleagues looked at the screen-related behavior of 400 public school students in North Carolina, ages 10 to 14. The group was picked as a representative sample of race and socioeconomic status for the entire U.S. The researchers found that even not counting time doing schoolwork on screens, kids spent between almost 5 hours to 7 hours per day on their devices, with older kids online the most. That's a lot of hours, but
overall what we find is no connection between the amount of time that young people spend online using digital technologies and mental health symptoms like depression, anxiety. When we do find associations, they were actually quite surprising to us. We found that young people who sent more text messages actually reported better mental health. Now, again, this was a small association, but it reflects what other people have found, that people who are very connected offline, that use technology in kind of positive ways to stay connected, often are more connected online as well and experiencing kind of better mental health.
The new study is in the journal Clinical Psychological Science. So why the fears about screen time? Odgers argues that the methodologies for older studies may have led to false conclusions.
One of the issues with the research that's been done to date has been that youth are, in school, they have a survey put in front of them, and they're asked to recall over the past 6 months, how often are you online, and have you ever felt depressed? And the correlation between those two things has been used to spread a lot of fear around this connection between social media use and things like depression. 99.5% of the reasons that kids differ in their depression is due to something other than the amount of time that they spend online.
Parents get a lot of advice, and some of it always seems to conflict. But Odgers suggests there's one place you can always go to get information.
The hope is that more parents will hear this message and relax and spend kind of less time worrying about smartphones and more time just talking to their kids.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jared Rizzi.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey, kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
A new level of despair has spread among tens of thousands of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border who have been seeking refuge, in legal terms asylum, in the United States. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's the beginning of a recent Associated Press report which goes on to explain the reason. Quote, the Trump administration has begun enforcing radical new restrictions on who qualifies for asylum, end quote, and who doesn't. And who doesn't is any refugee who has passed through a third country while fleeing for their lives on their way to the U.S. border, who hasn't applied for and been denied asylum in that country, which is to say, as a practical matter, that no refugee from Central America need apply for asylum. Let's return to the AP article. Quote, "The United States is the only option," said Dunia Romero, a 31-year-old Honduran, who had tears in her eyes as she spoke at a shelter in Tijuana. She said she packed her bags and fled her homeland with her 2 boys, ages 7 and 11, after learning that her abusive ex-husband, a powerful gang leader, was going to have her killed. Under this administration's rule, this woman and her children cannot even be considered for asylum, at least not unless and until the Supreme Court strikes down the Trump administration's rule as violative of either national or international law. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1868. That was the day that Susan B. Anthony and a committee on female labor called for a vote for equal pay for equal work at the National Labor Congress. It was the second annual meeting of labor leaders from throughout the nation. Anthony had begun publication of a newspaper, The Revolution. The paper advocated for an 8-hour workday and equal pay for equal work. Working on the paper, Anthony met women in the printing and sewing trades who were excluded from men's trade unions. These women began to form the Working Women's Association. Unfortunately, the male delegates to the National Labor Congress decided not to take up the push for equal pay. Today, a woman earns about 80 cents for every dollar earned by a man. In January 2009, President Barack Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Restoration Act. The act was named for a woman who fought for equal pay for equal work. Obama said, "The very first bill I signed into law as president was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Restoration Act. It was a big step toward making sure every worker in this country, man or woman, receives equal pay for equal work." He continued saying, "I signed this law for women like my mother, a single mother who paid her way through college and made huge contributions to a workforce that wasn't always fair to her. However, the wage gap has not really changed since the signing of that act. Even now, the amount a woman loses to the pay gap over the course of her life could feed a family of 4 for 37 years. There is still much work to be done to ensure all workers are paid a fair day's pay for a fair day's work."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
American intelligence is indicating that this weekend's attack on a major Saudi oil facility did originate from Iran. Even in a post-Bolton White House, the sabers are still rattling loudly for war. Donald Trump tweeted Sunday that the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded and ready to respond once it determines the culprit and learns who Saudi Arabia believes it was. And then in the Oval Office on Monday, Trump shockingly admitted that our military response was up to Saudi Arabia, who, he strongly inferred, was willing to pay the U.S. to be its military mercenaries.
You said the United States is prepared for war?
The United States is more prepared than any country in the history in any history, if we have to go that way. As to whether or not we go that way, we'll see. We have to find out definitively who did it. We have to speak to Saudi Arabia. They have to have a lot in the game also, and they're willing to do that. I think everybody knows they're willing to do that. So we'll be meeting with Saudi Arabia. We'll be talking to Saudi Arabia. We'll be talking to UAE and many of the neighbors out there that we're very close friends with. We're also talking to Europe, a lot of the countries that we're dealing with, whether it's France, Germany, etc. Talking to a lot of different folks, and we're figuring out what they think. But I will tell you, that was a very large attack and it could be met with an attack many, many times larger very easily by our country. But we're going to find out who definitively did it first.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, announced on Tuesday that, quote, there will be no talks with the U.S. at any level. Remarks apparently meant to end all speculation about a possible U.S.-Iran meeting between the two countries' presidents at the UN later this month. Trump, unsurprisingly, has again been lying to the American people about his willingness to meet with Iran with no preconditions. NBC's Katie Tur explains what's so dangerous about this.
These escalating tensions with Iran come after Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels took responsibility for an attack in Saudi Arabia that shut down 5% of the world's oil supply. The Saudis today said their initial investigation indicated Iranian weapons were used in the attacks. Iran has denied the U.S.'s claims. It's all happening against a backdrop of failed U.S. efforts to get Iran to the negotiating table, despite repeatedly offering them talks with zero preconditions. But to come back to the credibility of the president, he's now claiming that the fake news is saying that I am willing to meet with Iran, no conditions. That is an incorrect statement, as usual. Not only has the president said he'd meet with Iran with no preconditions multiple times on camera, but his top aides have as well, multiple times, on camera.
I would certainly meet with Iran if they wanted to meet.
Do you have preconditions for that meeting?
No preconditions, no. They want to meet, I'll meet. Anytime they want. No preconditions. You want to talk good, otherwise you can have a bad economy for the next 3 years. Not as far as I'm concerned. No preconditions.
The president has made clear he's happy to take a meeting with no preconditions.
The president's made very clear he's prepared to meet with no preconditions.
Today, the president reversed himself, insisting there were always conditions. Yes, it is hard to take this president at his word, but we're talking about threats of armed conflict with Iran from the commander-in-chief of the world's most feared military, as he rages about his political enemies and heads for a campaign rally. Mr. Trump has made it clear he does not want to be mired in another major conflict in the Middle East. But still, does that mean he gets to threaten it with impunity?
The Manhattan DA's office on Monday sent a grand jury subpoena to Donald Trump's accounting firm to get his personal and corporate tax returns for the past 8 years. The subpoena stems from the investigation into payments made to 2 women who have alleged affairs with the president, including porn star Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump has strongly denied the affairs. The president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, admitted to making an illegal payment to Daniels in order to keep her quiet in the days leading up to the 2016 election. Cohen is currently serving a 3-year prison sentence stemming from those payments. In light of new sexual misconduct allegations leveled against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in the New York Times, several prominent Democrats have called for an investigation and, in some cases, Kavanaugh's impeachment. The House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, though, said that they're too busy. During a radio interview at WNYC, he said, quote, "We have our hands full with impeaching the president right now. That's going to take up our limited resources and time for a while." Nadler did say that his committee plans to question FBI Director Christopher Wray next month and will include questions about the agency's investigation into Kavanaugh. If it's Tuesday, they're voting in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is vying for an unprecedented 5th term as prime minister, but indications are it won't be an easy win. Voters there are hitting the polls for the 2nd time in 5 months after Netanyahu failed to form a coalition government. Once again, Netanyahu's Likud party is in a tight race with the Blue and White Party, led by Netanyahu's chief rival, Benny Gantz. Bibi is doing all he can to fire up his right-wing base and playing up his relationship with Donald Trump, who is popular there, again, with the right wing. Israel's 7 hours ahead of the U.S., so we should know more by the early afternoon. Early reports say there has been high turnout at the polls. Closer to home on Tuesday, Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, is testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. But 2 other former staffers who were also subpoenaed, Rick Dearborn and Rob Porter, will most likely not attend because the White House asserted immunity for them, even though it doesn't seem to apply here. And Lewandowski may not say much either because the White House has told him not to answer questions about his conversations with the president where executive privilege could be invoked. Democrats on the committee reject the Trump administration's immunity and executive privilege arguments, with committee chairman Jerry Nadler calling them, quote, shocking and dangerous. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we're only going to top out around 60 today. 100% chance of rain, about a half an inch, starting about now, even though it's just a mere drizzle, a misty drop. The full force of the rain should be occurring, it looks like maybe in about an hour and a half from now. Or maybe it's already happened if you're listening to this by podcast. Tonight, we are expecting another quarter of an inch and an overnight low in the low 50s. And then tomorrow, looks like we're looking at about a third of an inch. So we are in fall. Thunderstorm activity tomorrow, so hopefully it doesn't knock out the mothership. That sometimes can happen here in Southern Oregon. So it looks like cooler conditions will prevail for a few days as we get closer to the weekend. Temperatures should start inching up into the mid to upper 70s, and then some days of low 80s, upper 70s type weather. We'll see how long that lasts. Of course, low pressure is dominating the region, and pressure is falling at 30 inches. Visibility is down to 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 94%. 94%. Weather from around the world is... Oh, you know what? I apologize. I forgot to give you the pollen is none. The local air quality index is good at 23 parts per million. Oh, and the daytime UV index has dropped a notch into the moderate range now at 5. All right. Sorry, I got that a little bit out of order. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. All righty. London is 68 and sunny. Paris is 73 and sunny. Rome is 84 and fair, though they have a heat advisory. Interesting. Kiev is 65 and fair. Kabul is 76 and fair. Hong Kong is 83 and fair. Tokyo is 77 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 57 degrees with rain and wind. San Francisco, California is 58 and sunny. And New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and a late summer sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Michael Holden of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Boris Johnson could recall Parliament if Britain's highest court rules he unlawfully suspended it, a government lawyer said today, after judges heard the Prime Minister wanted a shutdown because it was an obstacle to his Brexit plans. Johnson announced on August 28 that he had asked Queen Elizabeth to prorogue or suspend Parliament for 5 weeks, from last week until October 14. He said the shutdown was necessary to allow him to introduce a new legislative agenda. Opponents said the real reason was to prevent scrutiny and challenges by Parliament, where he now has no majority. And it was challenges to his Brexit policy, especially his promise to leave the EU by October 31, even if no divorce deal has been agreed. They want the Supreme Court, the United Kingdom's highest judicial body, to rule Johnson's actions were illegal. Critics, including rebels thrown out of his Conservative Party over Brexit, say he should resign if that is its decision. The consequence of his advice to the monarch being ruled unlawful could be that he goes to the Queen and seeks the recall of Parliament, Richard Keane, the government's chief law officer in Scotland, told the court. In a damning judgment last Wednesday, Scotland's highest court said the suspension was unlawful and an egregious attempt to stymie Parliament. However, a week earlier, the High Court of England and Wales rejected a similar case, saying the matter was political and not something judges should interfere in. All 11 judges on the Supreme Court will now decide on a crucial question: how far Britain's unwritten constitution limits the power of the Prime Minister, and whether Johnson's advice to the Queen was therefore illegal.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
David Lundgren, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The arrest of a top Canadian police officer on charges of leaking secret information could hurt intelligence operations by allied nations, the head of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said yesterday. Cameron Ortis, a Director General with the RCMP's Intelligence Unit, was charged last Friday under a 2012 security information law used to prosecute spies. We are asserting the impacts of the activities as information becomes available, RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lukey said in a statement. We are aware of the potential risk to agency operations of our partners in Canada and abroad, and we thank them for their continued collaboration. Security experts say the case could damage Canada's standing inside the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network that also groups the U.S., Australia, New Zealand, and Britain. Mr. Ortis had access to information the Canadian intelligence community possessed, said Lukey. He also had access to intelligence coming from our allies, both domestically and internationally. And I'll just cut to the chase and say this guy turned it over to the Russians and they caught him. Unfortunately, he had been doing it for some time, and they don't know how many assets, meaning human assets have been compromised, and if they're still alive or not. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and we will be back here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pas fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.